Dear friends, news from the main line has not been good, especially where Gordon was concerned. His pomposity led him to take yet another blow, just as he heard that his brother, Flying Scotsman, had finished his overhaul and was visiting Sodor. An accident involving one of the station pilots at Barrow-In-Furness and a ghost embarrassed him in front of his brother. To make matters worse, the station pilot had to be mended. The only one available was a certain Class 08 shunter, who had changed a little bit since his last visit to Sodor. His devious means had declined somewhat, mainly out of concern for his own survival. But I mustn't say any more, or I shall spoil the stories. The author. Barrow Engines by A.H. Brazier. Based on the railway series by the Reverend Wilbert Awdry and Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends by Britt Allcroft and David Mitten. The Vicarstown Bridge disaster. Vicarstown Bridge plays a vital role in the running of the Fat Controllers Railway. It links Sodor to the mainland between Vicarstown and the NWR's terminus, Barrow-In-Furness. In the past, Gordon would race back and forth across the bridge with the express. It would then be taken over by another engine at Barrow, who would take it on to London and other places. Recently, however, the Fat Controller had given the express to Pip and Emma, the high-speed train. It was partly because each engine was at one end of the train and they didn't need to spend time being turned around, and that they were diesels, for steam engines nowadays need special arrangements to run on the main line. However, the main reason for this change was quite different and quite disturbing. A legend surrounds the bridge as the result of a terrible accident years ago. The Fat Controller came to the sheds one morning where he had asked to meet all the engines. "I have some excellent news," he announced. "The National Rail Museum in York has—" "Asked me to come back?" interrupted Thomas hopefully. He had hoped to see some of the friends he had made there again, but some loud shushing from the other engines and a hard stare from the Fat Controller greeted this. Thomas fell silent, embarrassed. "The National Rail Museum in York," continued the Fat Controller solemnly, "has announced that its resident LNER A3 Flying Scotsman has finished its overhaul and is coming to Sodor tomorrow." This was greeted by a chorus of cheers and whistles, none more louder than Gordon the Big Engine, Flying Scotsman's only surviving brother. "Long living, faultless, reliable, indestructible. That's us Gresley engines," Gordon boasted in the big station. "Not even the worst possible accident can destroy us. That's why Flying Scotsman and I are still around." "And what about burst safety valves, faulty whistles, and jammed turntables combined with ditches?" Thomas asked cheekily. "Pah! They were just high spirits back in my younger days," Gordon retorted. "I'm a lot more wiser and reliable than I was then, and just as fast." Just then, the Fat Controller walked over to him. "Gordon, you are to meet Flying Scotsman at Barrow-In-Furness tonight," he said. "You'll be taking a rail tour with you, and Flying Scotsman will be double-heading the train in front on the return journey tomorrow." Gordon sputtered. "Me? Not being in front of a rail tour? Oh, the indignity," he moaned. "You will do as you are told," came a blunt reply. "Cheer up, Gordon. At least the two of you will be pulling the train together," Thomas comforted. "That's true, little Thomas. At least it'll show all you smaller engines just how great we A-class engines really are. I know I shall arrive there in fine style and leave in a similar manner." "That's just what another engine thought," murmured Edward as he backed down with a train for his branch line. Huh! Snorted Gordon. Not another reminiscence of the past. I would have thought we would have had enough of them after Bayer left. Anyway, I haven't time for this. I've got a rail tour to take. He puffed into the yard to collect his coaches, which Duck had already shunted for him. Pip and Emma were resting on the siding next to him. I certainly am looking forward to this rail tour. I haven't gone as far as Barrow in years. Gordon beamed, still boasting. That must be why the Fat Controller chose me, the fastest engine on the island. Don't forget, Gordon, we're fast too, exclaimed Emma, but Pip shushed her. It'll make things worse, she hissed, and continued. I must admit, Gordon, it is rather fitting, since he is your brother. Anyway, we've been scheduled to cover your express tonight, so at least we get to see more of the island than we usually do, she added, mainly in an attempt to pacify her sister, Emma. Emma, kind and patient though she and her sister were, was not one who liked to be shushed. That's true, although I doubt the passengers will be as keen. They won't be travelling on a real engine after all. This time even Pip was angry. Hurry up, Gordon grumbled to his passengers at Tidmouth. Be patient, Gordon. You don't want anything to happen like the time the fireman mistook a lady's hat for the guard's flag, do you? The driver replied. The fireman opened his mouth to retaliate. It was not something he recalled favourably, to say the least. But before he could say a word, the guard blew his whistle and waved his green flag. Gordon started so quickly they almost left him behind. Come along, Gordon sang to the coaches. We're coming along, the coaches sang back. Bridges and stations flashed by. They powered up his infamous hill and coasted down the other side, whistling loudly as they did so, only stopping for water at Vicarstown, when it was dark and a mist was beginning to roll in. The bridge between Vicarstown and Barrow-In-Furness is not a place that one would want to visit on a misty night. Gordon had never had this happen to him, as had Pip and Emma. Their trains had mostly been in the day, since it would take too long for an engine to run all the way from Tidmouth to London, and it would be too dangerous at night to do so. The bridge's history was rarely talked about by the locals in Vicarstown and Barrow because of the legends that surrounded it. Unfortunately, tonight was the night it always happened, on that particular day in the year. Gordon paid little attention to the mist. Ha! He snorted. I've managed all right in fog like this beforehand. But he didn't know what lay ahead. All was going smoothly until he was halfway across the bridge. They were thundering along the line when the driver reached for the brakes. There's another train on the line, he cried. The fireman braced himself for impact, but it never came. The driver, confused, released the brakes and drove Gordon slowly forwards. Gordon had his own thoughts on what he had seen. The train had disappeared right as he was about to hit it, and it looked familiar to Gordon. As soon as they had gone a little way, the driver looked back to where he had seen the train and froze in horror. The fireman, thinking the driver was just seeing things, went to look out to prove nothing was wrong. He too saw a white figure of an engine, built to a similar design to James, hauling a passenger train. In an instant, the driver leapt to the regulator, opening it to full. The fireman tried to calm him down, but the driver had wrestled him off. His face was pale with fright. It was nothing to what poor Gordon was going through. Mars! No! Get me out of here, please! He wailed. The driver needed no telling. Faster and faster they went, eager to get away from the apparition that was behind them. They went so fast that they went well over all the speed limit, fog detonators going off all around them. They didn't see the signal set at danger, in part because of the fog. They were too close to Barrow to stop in time anyway. A Class 08 diesel shunter was assisting a Class 220 Super Voyager diesel multiple unit in disassembling part of its train. The front engine had already moved off into one of the sidings to be refueled, while the rear engine waited for the line ahead to be cleared so it could move off and into the sidings as well. This was because a last-minute passenger had delayed the previous train's start. This shouldn't have caused too much trouble, for the delay was only a minute long. But the train the shunter was disassembling was on Gordon's line. Gordon whistled long and loud as he raced towards the station. The engine crews jumped out of their cabs, while the passengers and station staff ran for cover. Gordon, the Class 08 and the rear engine just shut their eyes. Crash! Gordon opened his eyes slowly. He saw he had overturned and now lay in the ballast. He surveyed the scene around him. His coaches were piled up behind, as station staff and passengers on the platform recovered the engine crew members and the passengers on the express that had been caught in the wreckage. Sirens wailed in the distance. The Class 220's coach lay in front of Gordon in pieces. The Class 08 shunter had also been overturned. Worst of all, the fat controller who had been on the train was standing on the platform. "Gordon," he asked furiously, "what happened this time?"
I saw Mars on the same line as me. He disappeared. But please, sir, you have to believe me."
The fat controller sighed.
"I suppose I do owe you an explanation."
"I believe this may have something to do with the Vicarstown Bridge disaster, sir?" asked a familiar voice. Gordon now felt embarrassment as well as fear. There, on the opposite line to them, having come to help take away the unhurt coaches, was Flying Scotsman. "I remember Mars in the old days on the LNER. He would sometimes help take trains up to London from Sodor. He wasn't the pleasantest sort of engine. He kept on calling any paintwork other than red disgusting, or any engine who was old, such as your number 2 Edward, out of date. One night, he was supposed to take a local between Barrow-In-Furness and Ballyhoo. The night was as foggy as tonight. The next we heard was that the bridge had collapsed and the train fell to the bottom of the sea." "Exactly, Scotsman," agreed the fat controller. He turned to Gordon.
"In the early days of the railway, the bridge between Vicarstown and Barrow was poorly built. It was a miracle you never fell off it with your weight, Gordon. Anyway, a few years ago we started receiving complaints from boats and ships of a white engine appearing and disappearing on the bridge. They said it looked like James or Eagle, but Eagle has been preserved by the Vicarstown Rail Museum and is under long-term restoration, and James was at the works for a repaint when it started. I knew it could only be one engine, Gordon, and that was Mars. I'm sorry you had to find out the hard way. That was also why you were taken off the express runs, to spare you the horror of seeing him again. I told Pip and Emma about him, but they mostly ran in the day, in all the times they ran the trains." Following this, the fat controller turned away. He and the station master were discussing the damages. "I acknowledge that'll take some time to repair your shunter. Is there anywhere you can find a replacement?" he asked. "Yes, there is," replied the station master. "One of the factories in the industrial estate outside here is going bust. They have a diesel shunter of their own. I'll ask if we can have him. We'll think about what to do with him when this one's mended. She's put in so many years' hard work, it would seem a shame to scrap her just yet." Gordon remained silent until long after he had been sent to the works, and his driver was sent to hospital to be treated for the severe shock he was in. Embarrassing himself in front of Scotsman was bad enough, but they were both quite agreed that what had happened was far worse. Gordon never makes runs to Barrow at night anymore. He is still too afraid. Mars's ghost haunts the bridge to this day. Whenever the fog is thickest in night time on the bridge, there he is, moving slowly across,
doomed to fail in reaching the other side for all eternity.